chapter 12. Chapter 12, I think. I usually forget where we're at in this because I leave my notes everywhere. I know I got some in the office, I got some at the radio station, somewhere at the house. My organizational skills aren't the greatest in the world, so usually I have everything written out and outlined, and I forget where I put it, so I have to go back and study again. So we're in chapter 12. Chapter 12. This is, I guess you'd call the War of the Ages. It's been taking place since before creation, since the fall of Satan, since he was booted out of heaven. And what you're going to be looking at is going to be it's going to reach this war of the ages between God and His angels, between Satan and his angels. It's going to reach a climax during the tribulation. And we're going to slowly go through this. The seventh trumpet was blown in 11:15, not 11 date, but chapter 11, verse 15. And the seventh angel sounded, and there was great voices in heaven saying, "The kingdoms of the world are become the kingdom of the Lord and of Christ, and He shall reign forever and ever." Okay, so that is the seventh trumpet. But you do not see the results of this trumpet until you get to chapter 15, chapter 16, and chapter 17 and 18. All right? So you see the trumpet is blown in chapter 11, but you do not see the results until you get to chapter 15, and that runs all the way through chapter 18, the results of that trumpet. Now, in chapter 12, 13, and 14, it's going to take us back, all right, it's going to take us back to creation. It is going to take us where the fall of Lucifer takes place, and it's also going to take us through the fall in the garden, and then it's going to take us all the way up into the tribulation. So in just a few chapters, we are going to get a different perspective and look through a different set of eyes, okay, than we have been looking. All right, in chapter 6 through 11, you have the perspective of God. All right? In chapter 12 through 14, you're going to have the perspective of Satan. Okay? So we're going to be in 12, 13, and 14. We're going to be looking at the perspective of Satan. Now, we see Satan's side in chapter 12, 13, and 14. We see his activities. Basically, it is going to be, we're going to see a rebellion against Satan in three phases. Satan in the garden and also in the tribulation in these three phases. All right? Now, and in chapter 12, 13, and 14, we're going to see the fall of Satan, and then we're going to see two of his cohorts. Okay? You're going to see an antichrist, all right, and then you're going to see his spokesman, which is the false prophet. The false prophet brings people to the Antichrist, okay? So you're going to see Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet, all right? No, Obama is not the Antichrist. For 8 years I heard he's the Antichrist. He is not the Antichrist. You've got to have more sense than he had, okay? So he is not the Antichrist. He was not the false prophet, all right? So the spirit of the Antichrist has always been around, all right? Not the Antichrist himself, but the spirit of the Antichrist has always been around, because there's only one person that knows when Christ is coming back. And who is that? God. The devil does not know. So the devil has got to have somebody in place, or a spirit in place, because he is going to only to have 7 years to get done what he needs to get done. So there's always been a spirit of the Antichrist around since the fall in the garden. Okay? So there's always been a spirit of the Antichrist around. Okay? Now, there are 6 main characters in 12, 13, and 14, right? I'll let you write these down. There is a woman. There is a dragon. There is a male child. There's Michael, the archangel. And there are two types of beast, one from the sea and one from the earth.
Two types of what?
Beast, B-E-A-S-T, beast. So you've got a woman, a dragon, Michael, a beast. You got a woman, a dragon, a male child, Michael, a beast from the sea, and a beast from the earth. All right. Chapter 12 is introduced. The woman, Michael, the male child, and the dragon. Those four characters are going to be introduced in chapter 12. All right. In the order of woman, male child, dragon, and Michael. The two beasts, one from the sea, which is the Antichrist. I'll let you go ahead and write that down. All right, and one from the earth, or one from the soil, whatever you want to call it. Okay, one coming up out of the earth. It's in verse 11 of chapter 13. That is the false prophet. Okay? You're going to be introduced to those two in chapter 13. It'll be a little bit before we get to those two. So you got 6 people that's in this saga. All right? Now, so the first 4 is in 12, and the last 2 is in 13. All right? Now, what you have to remember is that while chapter 12, 13, and 14 is taking place, the tribulation is taking place. But what John is going to give us is he's going to fill in the gaps of what we've missed. All right? Or how we have got to this situation. The Antichrist and the false prophet have been on the scene the whole time. They're just not coming on the scene in chapter 13. They've been on the scene the whole time in the book in the tribulation. All right? But what he's going back to do, it's like, I don't know, I use this phrase a lot. The term Reader's Digest version, there used to be a time, I don't know if they still do it, they would take these big novels and they'd squeeze them down to condensed novels. What John is going to do in chapter 12, 13, and 14, he's going to condense down the side of Satan in the tribulation. We're going to find out how we got to this point, or how he got to this point, or how he rose to power. Okay? He's just not going to stick the Antichrist and false prophet in there, and then we start thinking, okay, who are these guys? How did they get here? What do they represent? All right, so, and there is a word that is going to be used in chapter 12, and it's going to be found in verse 1, found in verse 3, 12, and 14. It is the word great. And if you'll notice in the book of Revelation, everything is bigger than normal. Great. And the word great in Greek means megas, or means gigantic or huge. Okay? There is a great wonder. In verse 3, there appeared unto another wonder in heaven, behold a red dragon. Everything is going to be great, okay? Everything's going to be great. And there's going to be wonders. It means megas. Now, in our Bible, in the KJV, it is going to use the word wonder. But in the original Greek, it is sign. Okay? Because it says, if you was to read this in the Greek version, in verse 1 it says, and there appeared a great sign. Okay? And if you see it in verse 3, it says, and there appeared another sign. Okay? So the word, when you see the word wonder, it is actually the word sign in the Greek. Okay? And what sign means, S-I-N, it is something that points to something else. All right? It is like when you cross over to the state of Georgia, and there's that sign that says, now entering Georgia. It doesn't mean that sign's Georgia. I can't get on top of that sign and say, look, I'm in the state of Georgia. What that sign represents is, beyond this point is what? The state of Georgia. All right? So what the book of Revelations, what he is saying when he uses the word wonder or the word sign, he is pointing to something else. All right? There is not actually a woman in heaven. All right? There is not actually a great dragon, not a fire-breathing dragon. He is saying these are types of, or this is what they represent. Okay? It shows the reality of something. All right? Now, in verse 1, No, let me get this. There is 4 women that are seen in Revelations, all right? And the reason I didn't go over these when we started the book is because I wanted to wait till we got to chapter 12. Now, there is a woman that is found in chapter 12, verse 20. And her name is Jezebel. And she is a sign, or she is a wonder. She is a type of, or a reality of. She is a reality of paganism. She is in one of the churches. Let me see if I can go back and look while you guys are writing. 2:20. She is Tyrithia. Yeah. Notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee, because thou hast sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. All right, she is the first one. The second one is found in chapter 17, verse 3. And while you guys write that down, I'll flip over. In 17:3, she is described as... So he carried me away into the spirit of the world, he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. Okay? She is a type of the apostate church. Okay? Because there's always going to be a type of religion. All right? You may try to get rid of Christianity. You might try to get rid of everything that points to Christianity, but you're never going to get rid of religion, quote unquote. Somebody is always going to worship something. Somebody's always worshiping a tree or a rock or an animal, or you look on the television, and they always show these poor, pitiful dogs. Send us all this money to save these dogs. Now, what about these kids that get aborted? So somebody's always going to be worshiping something. There's always been it's instilled in man to worship. Cain and Abel, what was the first act that we really see them doing? A worship, okay? The next one is going to be found in 19:7. It says, "Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him. For the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife." This is the first time she is going to be known as his wife. Before this, she is a bride. We'll get into that in a little bit. So there is a wife or a bride. Who is that? Us, church, all right? And then the last one is going to be found, what we're studying tonight, is 12:1. She is I seen a great wonder, or I say a great sign, and she is a woman that's going to be clothed in sun, moon, and stars, and she is Israel. The nation Israel. We'll scoot up. I don't know if I'm getting older, I just can't see anymore. So you got 12, you got Jezebel, which is paganism, scarlet woman, what is the name of scarlet woman? Apostate church, the wife of Christ, all right? Because in 19 we have the marriage supper of the Lamb, she becomes the wife, which is the church, and then you have the nation of Israel, all right? Now, a lot of people think that this woman in chapter 12 is the church. She is not the church, all right? The church is always referred to as the bride of Christ. She is not referred to, we went over this, as the wife of Christ until the marriage supper of the Lamb. And we say, well, a woman that is, during the marriage ceremony, she is known as a bride. But in Greek, or in Jewish culture, if you was betrothed, if you're a woman who was betrothed to a man, you were known as his bride at that point. When, I believe it was Rebecca was coming back with the servant, she was his bride because she'd been betrothed to him, okay? So, the church is a bride. She is never referred to as a woman, even though a bride is a woman, but she's always referred to either as bride or as wife, okay? So this woman in chapter 12 is not the church. And so let's look. And it says, and there appeared a great wonder, a great sign in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. What is the one tribe, even today, what is the one tribe and the one country that Satan and Satan's spirit has always wanted to get rid of? Say it, somebody. Jews or Israel. They don't want them around, all right? Now, in verse 1, this woman, which is Israel, and I'll show to you why it is Israel. She is in heaven, a great wonder in heaven. A woman clothed with sun. She's wrapped in the sun, all right? And with the moon under her feet, and upon her head was a crown of 12 stars, or diadems, all right? If you'll go back to Genesis chapter 37. Verse 9. Verse 9. All right. This is the dream. Let's start in verse 8. And his brother said unto him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? This is Joseph's brethren. Reign over us. And indeed have dominion over us. And they hated him yet more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream. And it was told to his brother. And he said, Behold, I've had a dream more. And behold, the sun. What is this woman clothed in? All right. And it says, and the moon was under her feet. Okay. But what is on top of her head? But what do we see here in verse 9 of Genesis 37? How many start? 11. All right. Now, the sun, and after you read the book of Genesis, you'll realize that the sun is Jacob, which is Joseph's father. Okay. Remember, he is the father of the 12 tribes. He had a favorite wife. His wife's favorite was Rachel. And she is the moon. Sorry. The 11 stars are who? There's 12 tribes. You give me 11 stars. The 11 stars are his brethren. But why did we get the 12th star in Genesis, in Revelations? Because of who? Joseph. So, who is, if Jacob is the father, basically, is produced these 12 tribes, and Rachel with his help and his other ones, and then you have the 11 tribes, and Joseph being the 12th. Who is this woman? Israel. Okay? That's why it can't be the church. Because in the book of Genesis, it is not a Gentile book at all. The Old Testament's not even Gentile books. So this woman is Israel. All right? Now, verse 2. Verse 2. So we found out who this lady is. She is the nation of Israel. All right? And remember, I think we talked last week that after the 3.5 years, at the breaking point of the 3.5 years, the only people that are significant in the tribulation are the Jews, right? So, we are getting close to the end of the 3.5 years, all right? And she is going to have a child. This is so obvious. A child, and she being with child, she hasn't had it yet. She's pregnant, all right? And remember, this cannot be the church because the bride of Christ is never mentioned as having a baby, is it? She is a chaste virgin, okay? Being with child, cried, travailing in birth, in pain to be delivered. All right. She is seen, and let's look how she is seen. She is seen with a child, and she is seen in agonizing birth pains. Okay? And basically she is crying. All right? Agonizing birth pains. With Crystal, I don't think she ever cried. She was having Christopher. I had to run outside and tell the doctor to get in there. This kid's about to come out. Same thing with Danny Lynn. So it was very quick. But you hear stories. For, being in labor for like a week. So, was it a pleasant experience? No. Okay, see? So this woman is in pain, all right, with this child, okay? Why? What does every Jewish woman want? A boy. A male child. If you had that male, if you was a Jewish mom, a Jewish wife, and you had your husband a male child, man, you could have $50 after that. It didn't matter as long as you gave him that one male child. All right? She is wanting a male child. Now, what was the nation of Israel always crying about and begging God for? A Messiah. We see that even in the book of Exodus, in the children of Israel in Egypt. What are they always crying out for? Send us a deliverer. Send us a Messiah. So we see the nation of Israel crying out for generation after generation after generation after generation. They are crying out for a Messiah. They are crying out for a Savior. All right? Let me see if I can find this really quick while you guys catch up on the notes stuff. Okay. Now, so we see Israel, and we see her with a child. All right? Now, the child is yet to be born in verse 2. All right? She's still carrying the child. Moving on, we see our third player. And then there appeared another sign or wonder in heaven. All right? And beheld a great, there that word is, great red dragon. All right? Having 7 heads, 10 horns, not the trumpet horns, but horns like an animal, and 7 crowns upon his head, or those are also diadems, okay? So there appeared another sign in heaven, and it is great. It is a red dragon having 7, 10, and 7. All right, now, before you ask what the 7 heads, 10 horns, and all that represents, you have to wait for chapter 17. All right, we'll get into that further. So for that. But we see a great red dragon. This is, if you want to draw a line out beside it, this is representative of Satan. Okay? Of Satan. But he is known as a serpent the first time when? Garden of Eden. All right. And also in chapter 12, verse 9, he is called an old serpent. But why is he called a dragon here? What's more deadly, a serpent or a dragon? So you see how he has increased in power from Genesis, the Garden of Eden, until the tribulation. If you're going to face something, what are you going to want to face? A serpent or a dragon? Serpent. Some odd reason, me and Christopher was outside the other day, and he was riding around a golf cart. Chris was playing hide and seek. Yeah, I'm 44, play hide and seek. He was on the golf cart, and I would hide from him around the house. He's going to come find me. So I was hiding around the house. I thought, where's he at? He went up to Mom and Dad's on the golf cart. And I heard this god-awful, oh my God! And I ran out, and I thought he got stung by a bee. He's on top of the golf cart. Oh my God! I said, what's wrong? It's a snake, and it's 10 feet long. Ah! And I said, what's a snake? Snake! And he's crying. So I run in the house, and Chris, come here, and we watch Chris run. He's on top of the golf cart. We get up there, and it's like, no, am I not going? It's about like this long. It's that long. And Chris is made out like it's some anaconda just crawled out of the Amazon. So, of course, we put it in the bucket, and Crystal's hand almost got in the bucket, but that's a different story. But we seen this, it was a serpent. But if it would have been a dragon, it would have been a different story. All right? So you see how Satan has moved from a serpent all the way up to a dragon. All right? So you see the progression. You see the progression of Satan also. All right. It's also back in the book of Job. It's actually a Leviathan, which is a sea monster, Loch Ness monster, Nessie, if you want to call it that. Who is Israel's ultimate enemy? And it is not Muslims. Israel's ultimate enemy is Satan. All right. So if you're going to have, and if you ever notice that when Jesus Christ is around, you're always going to have Satan right beside him or close to him, or God. You remember the book of Job, God sitting up there and the angels come to visit him. Who's next in line to see him? Satan. When God is talking with Adam in the garden and he's walking with Adam, who appears next as a serpent? Satan. Jesus Christ, when we talk about Mount Transfiguration, comes down, who they see? Satan. Like we preached Sunday, come out of the Sea of Galilee, there with Jesus, who the first person they see? Satan. And you'll notice that this dragon is not only megos, or gigantic, but he is red, which is the color of bloodshed. It means fierce, okay? The crowns and the horns, the round horns, it simulates power, because it tells us he has 10 horns, which is 10 past rulers. We'll get into that in chapter 17. But he is a ruler of past, ruler of present. He's going to be a ruler of the future, tribulation, ruler of the earth. You need to keep that in mind. Now, verse 4. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them into the earth. What is that a symbol of? When his,
the third part of the angels with him.
Correct, Frank. When God thrown him out of heaven, his tail, he basically says it's almost like a great red dragon took his tail and wrapped around the third part of the stars, and he drugged them in there with him. All right? So whether we know it or not, there's all kinds of stuff happening in the atmosphere, and got asteroids and shooting stars and all that kind of stuff. But you also have a war that is taking place up there in the cosmos, somewhere between God and Satan. And it's been happening since before creation. It started happening when Satan was thrown out of heaven, and he took his tail and drug a bunch of folks with him. Okay? So up there in heaven, as much as I love to study about all that kind of stuff, there's actually something bigger and greater happening. There is a war taking place between Satan and God. Now, I want you to look how he is pictured now. And the dragon stood before the woman. This is kind of a gross image. Really it is, okay? And Satan and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, to devour her child as soon as it was born. I looked up that word, and it means to eat until finished, ferociously consume all the way down, and leaving no hope for recovery. All throughout the Old Testament, we're going to look at some of this, all throughout the Old Testament, the New Testament, and even in modern age, Satan has tried to get rid of Christ, his bloodline, or his redemption story, all throughout the ages. It starts, we see a type of this in Genesis with Cain and Abel. But it's actually, you see a type of it with Cain and Abel in Genesis, but it is related to in John. So let me find it really quick. John 3:12. Not as Cain. Who was that? How is Cain described in 1 John 3:12? He is described as wicked. Okay? Cain is described as wicked. Now, in Matthew chapter 13:38, I hope I've got all my notes crossed up. 13:38, Jesus Christ says, the field is the world, the good seed are the children of the kingdom, or children of the saved, or children of heaven, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. And the wicked one is who? Satan. And how is Cain described as, what is his emotion? Wicked. All right? So you see Satan described as somebody that is wicked. The first person that is described as being wicked is actually Cain, according to 1 John, back in the Garden of Eden, or back outside, not Garden of Eden, but during the Genesis story. Okay? Why did Cain kill Abel? All boils down to green-eyed monster. Is it jealousy? He is jealous. What was he jealous of Abel for?
His offering was accepted in Cain's heart.
So that is a type of what? Satan. Being jealous of God. Cain, if If God would have accepted Cain's offering, Cain would have a problem with it. But God did not accept Abel's offering, so Cain gets jealous and he kills Abel, and then Cain is referred to in 1 John chapter 3 as somebody that is wicked. So that is a type of Satan trying to get rid of that line. But guess what happens? Eve has another child. Guess what his name is? Seth. Guess where Christ comes from? That line. Okay? So God has always got that's why it's referred to as providence of God. Satan's going to do something, but God has already got a counter move centuries ahead of time to go ahead and counter move that. Just like with Christians. He knows what you're going to do, so he's going to let you do it, but he's going to go ahead and counter move you. So you got to say, I love study Seth. He's amazing. So you have Seth, he's born, so Satan, that blows up in his face. Go to Genesis chapter 6. One of our church members was asking me about this the other night. Genesis chapter 6. This is another plan of Satan. Verse 1, it came to pass when men began to multiply the face of the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, humans. And the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives which they chose. These are not heavenly angels. All right? These are angels that have been cast out. So you see another way of Satan trying to interfere with the line of Christ, right? Or trying to destroy the line of Christ. We see it with Cain and Abel. We see it here in Genesis chapter 6. But God is going to destroy all of those folks, but he is going to save one person, or 8 people. He's going to save Noah and his family. Guess what comes out of that line? So that blows up in Satan's face. Even in Isaiah chapter 14, 12 through 15. Let me look at this. I know I'm giving you a lot of scripture. I just want to kind of make sure you guys get this. Isaiah 14, 12 through 15. This is what it says. Y'all don't have to look it up. Y'all just write it down. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? That is what his name means, son of the morning, or morning star, or bright star. How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Verse 13, for thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. This goes back to Genesis, doesn't it? This goes back to the creation story. Before the creation story. I will ascend into heaven, and I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit upon the mountain of the congregation in the sides of the north, and I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Also in Ezekiel, y'all can write this down, Ezekiel. This is a very interesting verse right here in Ezekiel chapter 28. This is real interesting. All right? Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 13, it says, Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering. And he goes ahead and he starts naming off all these stones. All right? And it says, in the day that thou wast created. So we have a garden of God, of obviously Eden. And he says, you have been in this garden that has got precious stones in it. If you study the creation story, that does not describe Eden as we know it. The Eden that is described in Genesis has got water, trees, animals, flowers. Never says anything about precious minerals. Okay? Now, verse 14. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down the midst of the stones. Thou wast perfect in all thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. Who is he talking about? Satan. All right. Now, go to Exodus chapter 1. Exodus chapter 1. Another way Satan is going to say, okay, I'm going to have to get rid of this Messiah. In Exodus chapter 1 verse 8, there is a key verse here. It says, Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. The king that before this was a king that was friendly to Joseph. He gave him land. He gave him all types of cattle and sheep and all this farm, and he actually gave it to his dad and his brother. But a new king or a new nation actually comes in, and he doesn't know anything about Joseph, doesn't know anything about the Jews, doesn't know the pact that they had made. So now when you get to verse 8, all of a sudden, this is what happens. Now there arose a new king that over not Joseph, and he said unto the people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more mightier than we. Let us deal wisely. We've studied this, guys, because they're going to multiply. And he tells the midwives to do what when a male child is born? Kill it. Pharaoh is a type of Satan in the Old Testament. So if he kills all of the male child, what's going to happen to the line of Christ? It's going to be cut off. But what happens? God, with his providence, is going to intervene. And there's going to be a woman have a baby, and she's going to take that little bitty baby, and she's going to put it into a little basket, and she's going to send that basket down the river, and all of a sudden, Pharaoh's daughter is going to raise that child, and guess what comes out of that line? Christ. Okay? Another thing blows up in Satan's face. There is a real, I don't know if you guys have ever studied this. In 2 Chronicles, there is a real interesting story in 2 Chronicles chapter 21. 2 Chronicles chapter 21, all of these kings have been killed. You get down to one king in 2 Chronicles chapter 21. In 2 Chronicles chapter 21, you need to read, we don't have time to read it, chapter 21 and also chapter 22, and that's why we don't have time to read it, in chapter 23. I'm going to give you the gist of it. All of these kings have been totally eradicated, all right? You get down to one king, one Jewish king, all right? And it is a little boy by the name of Joash. And his dad is killed. So a lady takes him and she hides his kid, all right, for 7 years until it is time for him to be brought out and be crowned king of Israel. And they hunt this kid, and they hunt him, and they hunt him. They're going to try to kill him. And all of a sudden, the people that are hunting this guy, this kid, are killed. And then it tells us that this kid is going to be brought forth, and he is going to be set as king over Israel. And he is a godly king. His name is Joash. Guess who comes out of that line? Jesus Christ. Now, we move on in to New Testament times. Nothing worked in the Old Testament. So now we've got the Messiah that's actually going to be physically born. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 13. And when they had departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared unto Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be there till I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So now we have Jesus Christ born. We see Herod, which is a type of the Antichrist, and he is wanting to do what to Jesus? Kill him. But what happens? The angel comes and says, Let's take him to Egypt, hide him out there for a few years, and when Herod dies, then you can bring him back. Okay? And then you remember there's several times in the New Testament when Pharisees comes up to Christ and says, Herod's hunting you. You better kind of stay. Herod's hunting you. And you'll notice that there is a time in that 3.5 years of Jesus' public ministry that he stays out of the jurisdiction of Herod, and the jurisdiction of Herod is Judea. He stays out of that jurisdiction and won't go near that jurisdiction for a while because he knows Herod is trying to kill him. There's another way that Jesus Christ has avoided being part of Satan's scheme. You remember in the wilderness, Satan tells, Jesus, fall down and worship me. Throw yourself off this temple. Do this, do that. Even Jesus Christ's redemptive story on the cross, Satan thought he was going to destroy him. But in 3 days, guess what? Rises from the grave. Jesus Christ ascends up into heaven. All right, so Satan defeats him there. He can't defeat him in the Old Testament, bringing forth his line, his bloodline. He can't defeat him while he's actually presently here on earth. So now he's got to do the next best thing, is get rid of his people. And then that brings us up into modern times. You had the Spanish Inquisition. You have the big one, which was 6 million Jews was killed under one person, Hitler. But guess what? Jews are still around. You're not going to get rid of them. And we see in the book of Revelations that this dragon, which is Satan, I'm about to quit. This dragon, which is Satan, is wanting to do something. He is wanting to get rid of this male child. He wanted to get rid of him. The first phase he wanted to get rid of him was by his line. We got to get rid of this kid. So Cain kills Abel, but God says, "Okay, I'll just send Seth." All right, Egypt, I'll just send Noah. So it's just on and on and on. Then you get into the New Testament. Christ is finally born. Herod's going to try to kill him. I'll kill Herod. And then Antipas comes around. I'll just wait till Herod Antipas goes. Then you have modern times, and you have all of this genocide of these Jews, but you're not going to get rid of them. All right. So you see the three phases of that. So this dragon is sitting before this woman, and he is ready to devour this child. And he is described now, and we're going to stop in verse 5. And she brought forth a man-child, which is Christ. So in 5 verses, we went from before creation to Luke, I guess, or Matthew. She brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. He will. And her child was caught up to God. So we go from before creation, according to Isaiah and according to Ezekiel, when Satan was kicked out of heaven. We go to creation. We go through the Old Testament. We get to the New Testament. And now we are with the child being born. We're with the child dying. And then we're with the child being buried. And now it tells us that he is caught up into God, to his throne. So in 5 verses, he covers a lot of ground. And he says, and that child was caught up into God, to his throne. And I'm going to leave you with verse 6. We're not going to go into it. Y'all can go home and study this. And the woman, all right, now this is going to go all the way. Now we're in the tribulation. So there is a gigantic, that white space between 5 and 6, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening there. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should remain there, or that they should feed her there, the Israel, or Jews, 1,260 days. 1,260 days, 42 months, or 3.5 years. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you and we love you for this study, dear God. We ask that you open our minds and open our hearts and open our souls, dear God, and open our eyes to realize that you are coming back. That what is taking place now in Revelations is going to happen. And dear God, we want to thank you with words, dear God, of thanks to say that all throughout the ages, Satan has always tried to get rid of Jesus. He's always tried to get rid of salvation and mercy and grace. But you've always, dear God, been there to counter his move. So that people now, even today, can receive mercy and grace. We love you, dear God, and we thank you. In your name we pray.